Eva mata cha pita tvameva, tvameva bandhuscha sakha tvameva, tvameva vedya dravinam tvameva, tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So last week, we had a discussion on one of the subtlest ideas that we've covered so far. So we finished the Anandamaya Kosha, and the Shishya says, "Oh Guruji, after having negated the 5 koshas, there's nothing left. By what instrument, by what is the self then realized?" And the Guru says, "Clever are you," meaning insightful, meaning of a subtle mind. And he says, know that the self is that by which the 5 koshas are known, that everything in the waking, dream, and deep sleep state is known. But itself can never be known as an object. Yet, it is known. And we had the term Swayam Jyoti, self-luminous. In the world, we know everything by what we call the triple T, the triple factor. Knower, knowing, and known. I am the knower, seeing is the knowing, water glass is the thing known. I am the knower, hearing is the means of knowledge, traffic noise is the thing known. We can go through all 5 senses that way. I am the knower, manas, mind is the knowing, the instrument, feelings, object of knowledge. I am the knower, buddhi, intellect is the means of knowledge, thought is the object of knowledge. Are you you? How do you know it? You do not see, hear, taste, touch, smell, feel, or think yourself, yet you know you are. The self is its own means of knowledge. It is self-evident, swayambhu, self-effulgent, self-luminous, self-shining, swayam jyoti. Then listen very carefully. In the subtle intellect, it has this insight. Technical term is pratya vinyanam, recognition, the aha, where in the subtle mind it goes, oh, there's no me. There's nobody there. Listen very, very carefully. The insight is not, I am an awakened person. I am now a realized person. I am a Mahatma, touch my feet. The inside is no personal sense of self is real. I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. I'm not a person. I am that grounded being. And any notion of a personal sense of self is false. So rather than making you feel puffed up and important, it's quite humbling to the mind. The mind sees its own unreality. The mind grasps, I can't think a real thought. No idea is fundamentally real. Only I is real. And then we started to get some meditation verses. We just started it. Beautiful shlokas where Shankara the poet reaches the great heights about what is the nature of the self. So what was the shloka was, did you say 217, Justin?
Yes, 217.
Okay, can you help us out, please, Puneet?
Sure.
Or is Ganesh here tonight?
Ganesh is here.
Ganesh, you do Thursday. We'll have Ganesh do Monday.
Sounds good.
217.
Yes, please.
Jagrat Swapna Sushuptishu Sputataram Yosau Samudram Pratyagrupataya Sadaham Ahamityantah Sapuranai Nanakara Vikara Bhagina Iman Pashyan Aham Dhimukan Vidyananda Chidatmana Spuratim Tam Vidhiswam Swamitam Hridi. That which clearly manifests itself in the waking, dream, and deep sleep states. That which is perceived inwardly in various forms by the mind is a series of unknown impressions of the ego, which witnesses the ego, the intellect, etc., which are of different forms and modifications, which is felt as existence, knowledge, bliss absolute. Know this Atman within your heart as your own self.
So this helps us have a direction of meditation. It points, it does not define. So let's pull each idea apart. So what was the first idea again, Ganesh, please?
You're muted.
Ganesh, you're muted.
Sorry. That which clearly manifests itself in the waking, dream, and deep sleep states.
Okay, so whatever I am seeing in the waking state, who knows it? I do. Whatever manifests itself in the dream state, who knows it? I do. And even in the darkness of deep sleep, I wake up in the morning and I know that I remember nothing. I must have slept soundly. So awareness was there illuminating the Anandamaya Kosha, pure ignorance. We went through that when we had that discussion. So, also, please listen carefully. Many of us are looking for a spiritual experience. I had a talk with a student and they were saying, oh, I think I'm beginning to experience Kundalini and I'm buzzing all through my body. Am I getting close? Well, did it have a beginning and an end? Did it occur in the waking dream or deep sleep state? Did it have qualities and characteristics? Drop it. That's not it. Oh, Jim, I think my crown chakra's opening. Is it an experience? Does it have qualities and characteristics? Does it have a beginning and an end? That's not it. Oh, Jim, I got so high. Did it have a beginning and an end? Did it have qualities and characteristics? That's not it. Who was aware of the ordinary mind before your experience? I was. Who was aware of whatever mind state you have? I was. Who's aware of what's going on right now? I am. That is it. Next idea.
That which is perceived inwardly in various forms by the mind as a series of unknown impressions of the ego.
Yes. So, as I move through my day, I go, I am tired. I am happy. I am not feeling well. I am angry. I am going to the store. I am going to make dinner. I am going to talk to my wife or husband. I am successful. I messed up at work. I am fill in the blank. The I am part is you. Cut off the direct object or nominative predicate, whatever it is. Get rid of what the qualifier. It's that unknown impressions. To what am I referring when I use the pronoun I? Listen carefully. It's the simple awareness of the most ordinary waking state. Who sees the phone? I do. That's yourself. My problem is not that I lack the experience of the self. My problem is I superimpose upon that experience all sorts of nonsense. The next one, I think, Ganesh, is, well, tell us what it is. I don't want to misquote it. Next idea.
Which witnesses the ego, the intellect,
Yes.
etc.
So you see ego rise and fall, thicken and thin. When you're self-obsessed, self-conscious, ego thickens. When you're completely absorbed in an activity, ego thins. In deep meditation, for moments it may disappear altogether. And then it comes back. You may be very clear, I am that witnessing consciousness, and then during the day you get identified. And then you realize, oh, I was identified. You see ego rise and fall. You are not the ego sense, because you can see ego. Next idea.
Which are of different forms and modifications.
Yes, the ego having different forms and modifications. I'm sorry. Going on to the next idea.
Which is felt as existence, knowledge, bliss absolute.
Yes.
Know this Atman within your heart as your own self.
So my spiritual heart is when the intellect has moments when thought flow has ceased. And in the mind, all struggling has ceased. So they come together, as it were, into thunderous silence. And in that silence, with the attention introverted, I notice, oh, Sat, I am pure existence. Chit, I'm conscious. I'm a sentient being. When the mind comes home to the self, the mind becomes blissful, because the self is bliss absolute. Know that as yourself. What you're looking for, you are looking with. The joy, the happiness, the respite, the peace that you seek in the world is your own self-nature. Next verse.
Ghatodake bimbatam karma bimbam alokya mudo ravimeva manyate tatha chidabhasam upadi samstham prantyahamityeva jadobhimanyate. The fool, on seeing the reflection of the sun in the water in a jar, considers it to be the sun itself. So too the fool, through delusion, identifies himself with the reflection of the chit caught in the intellect and considers it to be the I, his own identity.
Yes. So as consciousness strikes the subtle intellect, we get this feeling, this sense of being an individual, this reflected self, this shadow self, this chitchaya. The foolish person thinks that reflected self is who they are. But that reflected self rises and falls. It appears and disappears. Now, frequently in a beginning class, when we come to this point, I will pull out of the drawer my little teaching aid, the mirror. Many of you have been in class when I've had the mirror. Then I'll turn the lights up very bright. And I'll take the mirror and I'll shine it in people's faces. And then I ask the question, is there a light in the mirror? Well, there kind of is and there kind of isn't. I turn it around and look at the mirror, there's no light. I catch the reflected light. Yes, there's light in the mirror. It is the nature of the mirror to reflect the light. So it's the nature of the subtle intellect to have this reflection of consciousness, the feeling that I'm a person. But it's not a real self. Shankara here talks about the reflection of the sun. Sometimes they'll use the moon in a jar of water. Is there really a sun in the jar of water? No. But if I'm there looking in the jar of water on a sunny day and I see the sun in the jar and I smash the water, oh, the sun is broken. No, nothing's happened to the sun. It is the water that is now perturbed. Likewise, when that reflection of consciousness caught in the web of thought seemingly gets disturbed. I am sad. I am frightened. I am successful. I am important. And then we engage in strategies to bolster that ego sense, protect that ego sense. That's like disturbing the water in the jar. Does disturbing in the water in the jar in any way affect the sun? So whatever happens to the mind and the intellect and the body, the upadis, the conditionings, none of it ever touches me. Don't believe me. What you have to do, the practice is, whatever's going on in your life, stop for a moment, look inside, notice the noticer, look behind your eyes and see if you've changed. Are you perturbed, or are you the awareness that knows perturbation? Now, the funny thing about this reflected self caught in the web of thought, if you stop the thoughting, it absolutely disappears. Because it's not a solid thing. The thoughting itself is what makes it seem to appear. Any questions about this? Next one.
Ghatam jalam tat katam akarpam tat katam Ghatam jalam tadgatam arkabimbam vihaya sarvam vinirikshyaterkaha tathastha etatritaya babhasakah swayam prakasho vidusha yatha tatha. The intelligent man leaves aside the jar, the water, and the reflection of the sun in it, and sees the self-luminous sun. So too, the wise realize the self-luminous reality which illumines these three, and recognize it as independent of them all.
So turn our attention away from the body, the feelings, the thoughts. And if you can see no personal sense of self is real, when you feel like a person, understand that's just this phony self appearing. Stop. Turn away from it and notice the luminous sun of yourself. Meaning you are self-shining the way the sun is self-shining. You don't have to get out a flashlight and shine it on the sun so you can see the sun. Sun shines, it's a self-nature. So also you shine as the light of awareness always. Next verse.
Deham thiyam chet pratibimbamevam visrijya budhau nihitam guhayam drishtaram akhandabodham sarva prakasham sadasadvilakshanam nityam vibhum sarvagatam sukshmam antah pahi shunyam अन्यमात्मनः विज्ञाय सम्यक् निजरूपमेतत् पुमान् पिपात्मा विरजो विमृत्युः विशोक आनन्दघनो विपश्चित् स्वयं कुतश्चिन्न बिभेति कश्चित् नान्योऽस्ति पन्था भवबन्धुमुक्तेः विना सतत्त्वावगमं मुमुक्षोः. So too, leaving aside the body, the intellect, and the reflection of Chit in it, and realizing in the cave of the intellect, the witness, the self, which is knowledge absolute, which is the cause of everything, which is distinct from the gross and the subtle, which is eternal and omnipresent, all-pervading and supremely subtle, which is without exterior or interior, which is the one self. By fully realizing this, one becomes free from sin, blemish, death, and grief, and becomes the ocean of bliss. Being illumined, he is not afraid of anyone. For him who seeks liberation, there is no other path to break away from the bonds of transmigration than realizing the truth of his own self.
So again, let's pull this one apart. The important thing is whatever strategies you're using to try to fix yourself, you're exchanging golden chains or iron chains for golden chains. In the end, you are still bound. We may need to do some of these processes in the early part of our sadhana in order to quieten the mind. But they themselves do not free us. So here Shankara says, this is what happens. So the first idea, would you share it with us again, please, Ganesh?
So too, leaving aside the body, the intellect, and the reflection of chit in it, and realizing in the cave of the intellect, the witness, the self
Yes.
which is knowledge absolute.
So how do I leave it aside? I withdraw my attention from the body and all its sensations, the mind and all its feelings, the intellect and its thoughts, and renouncing any personal sense of self. If I think I'm a person, I'm deluded, drop it. No personal sense of self is real. And again, in the cave of the intellect. Well, I like to talk about this. If it's a bear cave, the cave is context, the bear is content. If it's a lion's cave, the lion is content. The cave is context. The cave of the intellect. Where do the thoughts, the subtlest thoughts, take place? In awareness. The most quiet mind, in the space between your thoughts. Who knows the thoughts and the space between? There's this vast, empty Chidakash, sky or space of awareness itself. Next idea.
Which is the cause of everything, which is distinct from the gross and subtle, which is
Yes.
eternal and omnipresent.
So it is the cause of everything. Out of it comes all imagination. By this strange power, this Maya Shakti. Somehow it is the nature of consciousness to seemingly fork into subject, object. The objects themselves are nothing but consciousness appearing as name and form. That awareness is different from the gross, anything perceived in the phenomenal world, and the subtle, any visions, any spiritual experiences, any feelings, any thoughts, ever the witness of it. Next idea.
Which is eternal and omnipresent, all-pervading and supremely subtle.
Yes. It is eternal, meaning it's outside of time and space. You cannot find a time when you began. All pervading, whatever experience happens, you are there to illuminate. And extremely subtle. It's closer than hand or foot, closer than your breath, closer than your innermost thoughts. It's your very experience of I. Next idea.
Which is without exterior or interior.
Yes. Just as all the elements of the dream are in you, so everything in this phenomenal world is actually in you. Gita expresses it so beautifully. First, Krishna says, all this is strung on me like gems on a thread, Mani Sutra. Mani Sutra. Then later on, he says, well, actually, I am not in them, they are in me. Just like all the elements of a dream are inside my mind. Then he'll go on to say, well, actually, they aren't really in me. Can we say that there's a real person, place, or thing in the dream? I don't take the elements of the dream and pull them out of my ear and put them in the drawer next to my bed in the morning. When I look out at the phenomenal world, what I'm really seeing is the self. No interior, no exterior, and the appearance of both. Next idea.
Which is the one self. By fully realizing this, one becomes free from sin, blemish, death, and grief, and becomes the ocean of bliss.
So it doesn't mean that the body never does anything bad, that the equipment never makes a mistake. It means none of that ever touches me. We quit trying to fix the equipment. Instead, get out. That's all the pieces of that verse, isn't it, Ganesh?
There's a couple more things.
Please, go on.
Being illumined, he's not afraid of anyone. For him
Yes.
who seeks liberation, there's no other path to break away from the bonds of transmigration.
So what does self-realization give us? What are the benefits? A good salesman is always putting the customer in touch with the benefits of the product. These are the benefits of self-realization. One, it frees us from existential fear. That's the big one for all of us. I'm afraid I'm not okay. I'm afraid I'm going to fall into some abyss. Ultimately, I'm afraid of death. When you really grasp, I'm not any of the stuff that goes on, then the yogi becomes fearless. The other thing self-realization gives us, I finally figured out where happiness is. Happiness is me. And I quit jonesing for the world. I quit struggling and striving to try to wring a little bit of joy out of this vacuous world. The world isn't bad. It's just empty. It's just empty. Doesn't mean we don't fulfill our role in the world. Deepa used a metaphor last night, and I just love it. She gets footnoted 3 times, and then I'm going to steal it. And she said, getting a promotion at work and stuff like that, it's just like a different level of a video game. It's not real. That's all it is. And a failure, your avatar gets blown up. Oh, golly, I'll start the game over. That's all it is. And none of it touches me. Here Shankara says, there is no other liberation than this deep transfer of our sense of identity from the body, the stupid ego, to the self. Any thoughts on this verse? Next one.
Brahma भिन्नत्व विज्ञानम भवमोक्षस्य कारणम येनाद्वितीयम आनंदम ब्रह्म संपद्यते बुधैः. The cause for liberation from transmigration is the realization of one's identity with Brahman. By means of this, wise men attain Brahman, the one without a second, the bliss absolute.
So what is it that liberates me from the sorrows of this world? It is realizing, remember that aha in the subtle intellect, the realization of one's identity with Brahman. That is liberation. Now again, we have what we call indirect knowledge and direct knowledge. The indirect knowledge comes from reading the scripture, from listening to the Guru. But then we must go through the process of intense renunciation, of long meditation, subtle discrimination between the self and the not self. At an auspicious moment, the mind stops. And puny little ego is gone. Disappears. It is not about acquiring occult powers. Reading a wonderful book called Eager to Love. And it's written by Richard Rohr. It's about Franciscan spirituality. And one of the things he talked about is how the original Franciscans deliberately chose to live on the margins. In Francis's first rule, which I think was in 1221, I think Rohr said, he did not want any of his followers to be involved in church hierarchy or civil hierarchies per se. So it's not about getting a title. I'm an acharya now. I'm a swami. I'm a professor. I've written books. You may do all this stuff. It means nothing. But for the one who is a full knower of the Supreme, who has retired into the Supreme, you don't need to say anything. People can feel it. You need no titles. You need no enlightenment certificates. Next verse.
ब्रह्मभूभूतस्तु संसृत्यै विद्वान्नावर्तते पुनः विज्ञातव्यमतः सम्यक् ब्रह्मा भिन्नत्वमात्मनः. No more does one return to the world of transmigration after having become of the nature of Brahman. One must therefore strive to realize one's identity with Brahman.
So, is this a temporary state? No. Once you've fully realized your self-nature, you're stuck. It is much like this. As Ramana Maharshi would say, just as with reference to your body, you do not forget that you have a human body. You don't wake up in the morning doubting that you're a horse or a cow or a goat or a pig. You know you have a human body. There is no effort. You don't have to practice discrimination. It's obvious. So also for the person of realization. There's no effort anymore. It's constant knowledge, effortless knowledge of your own self-nature. It's what we call sthita prajna, steady wisdom. Next one.
Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma Vishuddham Para Svattasiddham Nityanandaikarasam Pratyak Abhinnam Nirantaram Jayati. Brahman is existence, knowledge, absolute, extremely pure, transcendental, self-existing, eternal, indivisible bliss, not essentially different from the individual jiva, and with no differences within or without. It is ever victorious.
So here is a verse describing the nature of yourself. It's what we call a meditation verse. Take each one of these ideas and see whether or not it is true about you. So let's take each one of these ideas one by one. The first idea again, Ganesh.
Existence, knowledge, absolute.
Yes. You are. You're not a zero. And you shine as the light of awareness. always. Next idea.
Extremely pure.
Yes. So there's nothing there. There's no taint, no dirt, no stain. The equipment is always impure by definition. But you are always immaculate. Next idea.
Transcendental.
Yes. Meaning you are outside all of phenomena. You transcend it all experiences, all time, all situations, all mind states. Though you illumine them, they never touch you. Next idea.
Self-existing.
Yes. It is self-evident, self-existence. It knows itself. You know yourself. Nothing causes you to come into existence. You are not the result of anything. Next idea.
Eternal.
Yes. And again, this is outside of time, not just very old, but time exists in you. Next idea.
Indivisible bliss.
Yes. There are no sections, there's no parts of you. You aren't cut up in any way. Homogeneous mass of consciousness. Next idea.
Not essentially different from the jiva.
Yes. So what is the jiva, the sense of individuality? The best way I have of explaining it is if you take your hands and make them into a tube and look through the tube, your peripheral vision is occluded to some degree. But nothing has happened to your eyeball. If you remove your hands, you have the vast panorama of your vision. So also, when consciousness peeps through the individual intellect, it seems like I'm an individual knower. But when I stop the thinking, the thoughting, that self hasn't expanded, it hasn't changed. I just see it for what it is. It is the simple awareness of the most ordinary waking state. Samadhi, deep, deep, ecstatic quiescence of mind. Oh, that's wonderful. In the beginning, that reveals the purity, the nothingness of me. But when the mind comes back and is engaged in ordinary transactions in the world, I do not disappear. I had a student once, and God bless him, he would say, oh yes, I realized the self X amount of years ago, but I lost it. And I've been trying to get back there ever since. I don't know what he experienced. It's probably very good acid. But if he felt like he lost it, he did not experience himself. He didn't realize who he was. You can't use yourself. When are you ever not you? Now find out, who are you? What are you? Next idea.
No differences within or without.
Yes. So whether you're deeply engaged in meditation and interior, or perceiving the world, you are always you. Is that the end of that verse?
Yeah, it says it is ever victorious. That's the last.
All right, next verse. Oh, wait a minute. What time is it? 8:27. Let's do one more.
Sadidam paramadvaitam swasmad anyasya vastuno swasmad anyasya vastuno bhavat nahyanyat tasti kinchit samyak paramartha tattva bodhadashayam. This absolute oneness alone is real, since there is nothing other than the self. Truly, there is no other independent entity in the state of realization of the Supreme Truth.
Yes. So understand, what is that which knows the self? It is the self that knows the self. There is no other independent entity, no function. I am, and that's obvious. That's why we call it perfect. When do you ever not know yourself? It can't be gained. It can't be achieved. It can't be lost. When are you ever not you? That's the only real knowledge. And that's why the great mid-20th century saint Meher Baba used to say, everybody's already realized. Don't worry, be happy. Because the only real knowledge of the self is the self-evidence of the self. But this profound shift in the mind is important at the level of our happiness in the world. So Yoga Vasishta says, there is no other bondage than the deeply rooted conviction that I'm bound, meaning I think I'm my body. There is no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction, rooted in direct experience, that I'm free, meaning I know I am Brahman. And then he goes on to say, both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. The self is ever free. Now notice, you can have the thought, oh yeah, I am Brahman. And you can be involved in a project. I'm making food. I'm not having the thought, I am Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. But even if I'm making salad and chopping onion, I don't disappear. My existence is not dependent on the thought, I am Brahman. So we start to let all that nonsense go. The only thing that's real is a hum, hum, hum. I. All right, we'll quit here. What verse are we on next?
We start 227.
227. Does anyone have questions or comments? Going once. Going twice.
Hi, Jim. This is Sound.
Yes, Sound. Ask a question.
I have a really silly question. So the meditation verse, you mentioned that you pick every idea and see if it's true. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that process? If you haven't realized the self, how do you know it's true?
Well, don't worry about realizing the self. Just start thinking about what's your direct experience. So let's do this again, your own direct experience. Now, if you look at an object in your house, look at an object in your house. What are you looking at? What, your laptop?
Yes, my phone.
Okay. Are you a laptop or a phone?
No.
How do you know that?
I just do. I'm not.
You're the one looking at it or holding it, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you have a subject-object relationship. Now take a deep breath and feel the breath in the body. Mm-hmm. Do you not know the breath in the body?
Yes. You
do, yeah. You have feelings, joys and sorrows, etc. Do you not know your feelings?
Yeah, I do.
You're not a feeling. You're the knower of your feelings. Think the thought 2 plus 2.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a thought? Or are you the knower of your thought?
Mm-hmm.
The self is difficult to realize, not because it's far away sound. Mm-hmm. It's because it's so profoundly ordinary. We're looking for some big thing. It is so simple. It's the most obvious. It's you. Are you you?
Mm-hmm.
How do you know it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you doubt that you are you?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Then you know yourself.
Well, I guess the big words like, oh, it's,
it can't be that simple, right?
Yeah.
It is. It is that simple. Don't believe me. We've been reading Shankara. That's exactly what he's been saying. Now, when you get identified, oh, I'm so upset, my project didn't work, or such and such like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, wait a minute, is it you that gets upset? Or is that that chit chaya? Is that reflected self? And you see it come and you see it go. It can't be you because you see it come and go.
Mm.
Westerners don't have this particular challenge that Indians do. We revere self-realization so much. We are convinced it must be so difficult. It must be so far away. It must be so spectacular.
Mm.
And I tell you, it's so immediate. It's so here. It's so ordinary. Doesn't mean it's not profound. How long should I keep doing sadhana, Jim? Till your mind quits throwing up doubt.
Yeah, I understand.
As long as you still have doubts, keep scrubbing away. But Shankara is saying, if self-realization is the self-evidence of I, do you know you are you?
Mm.
Do you?
Yes.
Sure?
Yes.
You sure you're not a little gray ball with wings?
Nope, I'm not.
You sure there's not a mango in there?
No.
You are you. Well, what's the nature of you? Look. In a quiet mind, when you look inside, do you see anything?
No.
No,
I don't.
You sure?
Yeah.
There's not lightning bolts in there?
No, there isn't.
There's nothing. But that's not spectacular, Jim. That's right. Now, the student, the seeker, does spiritual practices so she may purify her mind and realize herself. The woman of wisdom may also be seen to be doing practices. It does not add to her knowledge of the self. It's just the highest form of worldly pleasure. I've had some yogis who are pretty rooted in their knowledge. They go off and do vipassana retreats. And they come back and I say, do you know any more self? Did your self change? Did your mind get really quiet? Was that nice? Don't worry, when you start getting agitated in the world and you quit practice, it'll go away. But they're just mind states.
Yeah.
When are you ever not you? And nothing will ever touch that. Now, if ignorance comes back in your mind, the avarana shakti, and then you have the vikshepa shakti, saundarya seems real, then the world will upset you. You quit realizing it's a video game.
Mhm.
Is that making sense?
It is, yes. Thank you, Jim.
Good question. Good question. But many people go through this thing. It can't be that simple. It can't be that obvious. Yeah. All right, let's sit. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Chai. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat.
Thank you, team. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ganesh, for chanting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.